from here. So you could get whiplash today from the torrent of reaction and the tea leaf reading into last night's Democratic wins in Virginia and New Jersey. On election nights, that one day each year, we try to figure out what it says about where we are going.
Even within the GOP, you are hearing this was about Trump.
It's a good night for Democrats, and I think a rejection to a degree of Trump, and perhaps even more than Trump, Trumpism.
That man and his party have been sharply rebuked.
So sometimes they are right, and sometimes they are wrong.
It's been what they call a historic event. But to be really historic, we have to do a great job. And I promise you that I will not let you down.
Ah, yes, it was one short year ago. Can you believe it? When the pollsters and the pundits had to eat some crow after getting the race for the White House stunningly wrong.
I think we're all, at least I'm coming to the conclusion tonight, conclusion's the wrong word, to open to the possibility Donald Trump could be the next president of the United States.
He blew all of our predictions and models and you name it out of the water. He is going to feel unshackled.
Donald J. Trump will become the 45th president of the United States, defeating Hillary Clinton in a campaign unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime.
Wowza. Remember all that? So today the president tweeted this photo to commemorate that 1 year ago. Congratulations to all of the deplorables and the millions who gave us a massive, and he reminds us of the numbers just in case you forgot, 304 to 227 electoral college landslide victory. So after a year of the biggest electoral shock in U.S. history, the GOP last night loses an off-year election in a blue state. President Trump weighed in early with a tweet from China with this assessment. Ed Gillespie worked hard, but did not embrace me or what I stand for. Don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win, even bigger than before, he says. So who's right? Are GOP voters sick of the sclerotic pace on Capitol Hill? Definitely. Are independents turned off by President Trump? In Virginia, the answer appears to be yes. But a year after his astounding win, the president is as frustrated as anybody, no doubt, with the sluggish Congress. So will his outside forces, perhaps like Steve Bannon, sweep out the establishment candidates and bring in more Trumpish candidates? And can those candidates win? Earlier this evening, I spoke exclusively to Mark Short, White House Director of Legislative Affairs, and asked him if voters are running out of patience with the GOP leadership and perhaps the Trump presidency.
I don't think voters ran out of patience. In fact, Martha, if you look at the actual federal races since Donald Trump won the open seats, Republicans are 5 for 5 in those open congressional seats, which included last night, granted, a Republican district in Utah, but that gives us 240 House members to help deliver on our agenda. The reality is Virginia's been a state that has continued to trend to the left. And Ed Gillespie is one of the smartest political people I know, but it's a tough environment to run in Virginia right now. And if you look at what happened last year, I think what Americans embraced was the fact that they wanted an outsider who would come to this town and disrupt Washington, which is what President Trump has been doing to shake up this town and to get it responding back to the American people. And for all of Ed's great qualities, it's hard to say he's an outsider the way that Donald Trump is.
But, you know, last time he ran in 2014, he won Loudoun County by 456 votes. Last night, he lost it by 23,000 votes. So that has a lot of people scratching their head about whether or not, as I said, there's some frustration with what's going on, both on Capitol Hill with Republicans, maybe more so, maybe it's more about that, and perhaps with the president. I mean, you heard all of the prognosticators. They believe this is a changing tide as of last night.
I think it's too early to look at what a changing tide is. I think, in fact, what you're seeing again is that 5 out of 5 times voters have chosen to re-elect Republicans to open seats in Congress. They want us to deliver on the promises we made. There's no doubt there was a lot of frustration this summer when Republicans failed to deliver on their promise to repeal Obamacare when given the opportunity. Now we have a chance to deliver on the promises of delivering tax relief to the American people. It's important to make sure this economy continues to turn around and actually prepare propel faster to provide growth, to provide more jobs, and provide more financial security to American middle-income families.
Let me ask you this, Mark. We have a full screen that shows 12 GOP legislators who have decided not to run again. In most of these cases, if they were sure they were going to win again, it's unlikely that they would be making this choice. What does that tell you?
No, I don't agree with that, Martha. I think if you look at many of those districts where members are choosing to retire, they're in very safe Republican districts. There are many cases they're choosing to retire for their own reasons. And I think as well, I think that Washington has become a frustrating place for many members. We are anxious to accomplish more, and the president's going to stay focused on delivering the promises he made to the American people.
All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about tax reform and how you think it's going. I know you were part of a meeting where the president phoned in, and you all met with a couple of you, you and Gary Cohn, I believe, met at the Library of Congress with some Senate Democrats. What was their reaction to this tax reform bill that is getting a lot of mixed reviews, shall we say, at this point?
Well, Martha, I think that what Democrats have said is they want to ensure that the tax reform package is focused on middle-income families. And for many of these Democrats that in states that Trump won in 2016, in the upper Midwest, these are states that have seen manufacturing jobs flee America, in large part because our corporate tax system is so outdated. So they're looking for the same things we are. The question is whether politics will stand in the way, because what we're delivering on is what the president promised and what they say is needed in our country. Again, the question remains, will they cross the divide and say this is better for our country, or will this remain a partisan dilemma?
So will they?
Look, we are hopeful they will come over. We are having meetings with them to try to say, we want your support. We want you to help improve the bill. We want this to be bipartisan. But if they ultimately choose not to, we believe we can get this done with Republican votes.
You know, there are some takes on this. One is from the Wall Street Journal's Richard Rubin that makes it look like 10 years out, this is a bill that leaves a lot of people, half of them, fewer than half of U.S. households, still getting any tax cut by that point. And a third would see their tax liability changed by less than $100. Do you agree with those numbers?
No, absolutely don't agree. In fact, even the Joint Taxation Committee, which is certainly not a Republican-leaning organization, it's a bipartisan group, has said that every income bracket will receive tax relief. What some people are doing is cherry-picking data because their taxes come down significantly in the first few years, and then in off years, is some of the tax credits that we're getting rid of and making the tax code simpler, those phase out. And so people see perhaps in an aberration in a year. But overall, in the 10-year window, everybody's income tax bracket, those taxes go down. So we're delivering on what we promised. Americans are going to get tax relief they deserve. In fact, if an average family today makes $59,000 in income in America, what estimates have said is they'll see $4,000 in wage increase and up to $1,200 specifically in tax relief. So we're delivering the tax relief on the targeted income levels we said we would do.
All right. When does the White House believe that this is going to happen? We've watched, Labor Day, we watched Thanksgiving, the end of the year. When is it going to be? And do you think it'll pass?
Well, what we're looking for is that tomorrow, hopefully, Ways and Means Committee passes out of committee. It comes to the House floor before Thanksgiving, turns to the Senate. We hope to provide it before Christmas on the president's desk for a bill to sign.
All right. So before Christmas, by the end of the year. Mark Short, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Martha.
Here with more, Charlie Hurt, Washington Times columnist, and Jessica Tarlow, Senior Director of Research at Bustle.com. Both are Fox News contributors. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you guys here
Martha.
tonight.
Hey, Martha.
Charlie, is this a repudiation of Trumpism? This is a part of Virginia, for example, Loudoun County, which I pointed out, which wanted Ed Gillespie to win last time around. 23,000 votes against him this time. What does that really tell you?
Well, without a doubt, it was a bad night for Republicans in Virginia last night. And the enthusiasm that we saw among Democrats across the board, and I'm glad you went outside of sort of close to Washington, but outside of the direct suburbs of Washington, where Democrats were obviously very, very enthusiastic, and that's a real problem for Republicans going forward. But I have a hard time trying to hang too much of this on Donald Trump. I mean, Ed Gillespie's hardly the face of Trumpism. He's a former RNC chairman. He's a former lobbyist in D.C., former White House chief of staff. He's hardly sort of the outsider that Donald Trump ran as. I think in as much as we this is a reflection of
so you're saying he was a bad candidate, that he couldn't have won? I mean, Bannon backed him. The president was tweeting all over the place about him the day of the election, but it took Ed Gillespie a long time to sort of cozy up and sidle up to them.
Yeah, I don't want to say he was a bad candidate simply because I think he ran a very admirable campaign. But we have to admit, his biography was not the greatest biography in this environment, especially if you're trying to appeal to Republican voters. But let me just say this one thing. In as much as this was a repudiation of Donald Trump, all we learned is that a state that didn't like Donald Trump a year ago still doesn't like Donald Trump.
But a little bit more.
All right, so Jessica, what's the message for the Democratic Party in all of this, Jessica?
That we've got to keep the energy up. I mean, this was the night. I mean, Ralph Northam was supposed to win, but by a slimmer margin. That was the big surprise here, that it was as wide of a margin. Obviously, getting all those delegates is a very big deal. Having our first transgender woman elected to office is something that Democrats certainly wanted and supported. It says something good about the inclusivity and the diversity of our party, that we have African-American lieutenant governor, et cetera. But I think, first and foremost, this is about energy. All the past year since the Women's March, Democrats have been worried, can we keep this up? Can we get people to turn out? Can we get our coalition there? And we did that in Virginia last night, and we did that in New Jersey. Yeah. And we're going to need to do that in 2018 as well. But I agree largely with Charlie's assessment. I think that the president did hurt Ed Gillespie in the end. That MS-13 ad, actually, Ed Gillespie's campaign manager came out and commented about that and said that actually it was a mistake because it energized Democrats to come out against him. People who might not have cared as much, maybe it would have even gone that way, thought it was an identity politics play, which Republicans do not do as well as Democrats.
Let me squeeze one in more here for Charlie. Charlie, when you look at that list of Republicans who are saying, I don't think I'm going to go through this over the course of the next year, and you look at all of the early polls and looks and gauges of these states, it does not look good for Republicans. Are they faulted the way they were last time in the polls, or is this for real?
No, I think that it is for real, but I think the bigger problem in a lot of those cases is that they know that in a primary, they could get destroyed by a candidate who is running more on a populist, Trumpist message.
Good point.
And that's a big reason why a lot of those people are choosing not to run again.
All right. I got to leave it there, guys. Thank you very much, Charlie Hurt, Jessica Tarlov.
Bye, Charlie.
So stay tuned to Fox News. Donna Brazile will be on with Tucker Carlson tonight. That is must-see appointment viewing. You're going to watch, right, Jessica? Right? We don't want to miss it. 8 o'clock tonight, that happens. And still to come right here on The Story, the GOP bill. Will you really get a tax cut? Will less money come out of your pocket and go to the federal government? House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy joins me with the late details on the latest version, and we have the whip count and what they think Republicans need to do in the House. And Democrats in distress tonight, as Donna Brazile, the aforementioned, now calls the Clinton campaign. She says it was a cult. You couldn't even get in there. It was a cult, those people surrounding her. So given Brazile's concerns also about Hillary Clinton's health, you got to ask yourself, why wasn't that a bigger story at the time across the board? But first, President Trump in China, a most important stop on this tour. President Xi, he will meet with. He wants to find a way to end the nuclear standoff with North Korea, but they are at odds on so many things. Mark Thiessen and Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz on what is at stake in China at this moment with President Trump when we come back.
History is filled with discarded regimes that have foolishly tested America's resolve.
Sit down one-on-one with President Xi. The president arrived at the most crucial stop of this Asia trip, a 12-day trip. It will be a test, no doubt, in Beijing of wills between two very strong leaders who want their countries to dominate on a global scale, an economic scale, and certainly with regard to national security for their respective countries. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live traveling with the president tonight in Beijing, and he has the story for us. Hi, John.
Martha, good Thursday morning to you from Beijing. It's also going to be a test of friendship and cooperation as well, and how the North Korean crisis unfolds in the next weeks and months may well rest on what happens here in the next 20 hours. President Trump is going to go into his meetings this morning with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, asking him to do more, asking for full implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions against North Korea, but say that's only a baseline. The president would like Xi Jinping to do other things, like at least temporarily cut off oil exports to North Korea, freeze North Korean bank accounts in the same way that the United States Treasury Department has, and take all of the North Koreans who are here working in China and send them all home. What's not clear at this point, though, is A, how much sway Xi Jinping really has over Kim Jong-un, and how much sway he really wants to have. because China really kind of likes the idea as North Korea standing as a cultural and political buffer to South Korea that's aligned with the United States and China. And looking way down the road, China doesn't particularly like the idea of a reunified Korean peninsula that's aligned with the United States. So it's in his interest to keep Kim Jong-un in power, though it's likely not in his interest for Kim Jong-un to be developing nuclear weapons, maybe be the subject of a U.S. military attack, because that's not good for regional stability. And China likes the way its economy is going, and economies and regional instability, robust economies at least in regional instability, don't necessarily go hand in hand. Don't forget there's also another big issue, and this is the thorny one between the two countries. That's the $347 billion trade deficit that the U.S. is running with China. That will be a big topic of conversation as well. And then later this week, maybe tomorrow or Saturday, President Trump is expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the APEC conference in Da Nang, Vietnam. I'm told this morning by the National Security Council that meeting not yet set, but both sides are open to it. So if I were a betting man, Martha, I'd say it's likely going to happen. Martha?
Fascinating. John, thank you very much. So with North Korea topping the agenda, as John just laid out during this trip, President Trump delivered a hugely consequential speech before the South Korean National Assembly in Seoul last night. He delivered some of his strongest words yet for the rogue regime. Watch this.
Today, I hope I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us. We will defend our common security, our shared prosperity, and our sacred liberty. We will not permit America or our allies to be blackmailed or attacked. We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction. We will not be intimidated. The weapons you are acquiring are not making you safer. They are putting your regime in grave danger. Every step you take down this dark path increases the peril you face.
Not a lot of wiggle room there. Fascinating speech last night. Mark Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and was chief speechwriter under President George W. Bush. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz is a former Green Beret commander and former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Cheney. Both are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to see you both tonight.
Thanks
Mark,
for being with you.
You know, the words, the language of that speech, very forceful. President Trump the other day suggested that North Korea come to the table, that it was time to talk. So what do you make of this sort of, 1-2 punch that he's giving them?
Well, first of all, it was a terrific speech. It was a forceful speech. It was a Reagan-esque speech. And it was if there's going to be a diplomatic solution, North Korea has to believe that the military option is on the table. So what I think President Trump was trying to do was make very, very clear last night that he is willing to take military action against the North Korean regime. The problem is the North Koreans really don't believe it. And it's going to take not just words, but actions to disabuse them of the notion that they're untouchable. And I think President Trump has a model for what to do, and it's what he did a few months into his presidency in Syria after the Syrian regime violated once again Barack Obama's red line on not using chemical weapons. After repeatedly doing so, it took him about less than 2 days to launch a military strike on the base that had launched that chemical attack, and that sent a signal to the Assad regime: you are not going to do that again, or you're going to face even worse. Yeah. And I think Donald Trump has to send a similar signal to the North Korean regime. He has to say to the North Koreans, your days of testing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles are over. I am declaring North Korea a no-fly zone for ballistic missiles and a no-test zone for nuclear weapons. And if you try to test them, we're going to take them out. Period.
So basically, Mark is saying that the president needs to put down a red line, Colonel Waltz, and if it's stepped over, there has to be a military response. What do you say?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And Martha, just to take a moment, this is such a hugely consequential meeting here with President Xi. The North Korean issue that Mark was just talking to is absolutely the immediate issue, and they have to believe, the North Koreans and the Chinese have to believe that either China will take care of this problem or we will. And I think President Trump is on the path to make them believe this. But the long-term problem, the truly strategic issue here, is President Xi believing that he is now the United States is equal in terms of a world superpower. And he just laid out, if you read his speech in the 19th Communist Party Congress, the path to actually exceed the United States. And if you look at their actions, from gobbling up natural resources around the world, currency manipulation, cyber attacks, the theft of our IP, we've become accustomed in the United States to dominating space, air, and sea. The Chinese are on the precipice of challenging us and taking a lead because of the theft of our technological edge over the last 20 years. So President Trump has to push back. I think he knows President Xi will respect strength. He will also respect, as President Obama never fully figured out, a personal relationship between the two leaders. So there is so much at stake here for the United States as a leader of the free world. I just can't underscore how consequential this summit is going to be.
Mark, what do you think about that? The argument that China has an edge in a lot of ways, and that we've allowed that to happen over the last, I don't know, probably 25 years, right?
Right.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, Brett played it at the end of his show. It was just China, 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 China during the campaign. But what President Trump has done is he's put those issues not on the back burner so much, but he's de-emphasized them because he's trying to use that as leverage with the Chinese to get them to take some serious action on North Korea. And this is another thing that he's trying to get. He's not just targeting Kim Jong-un when he says these things. He's also targeting the leadership in Beijing because I don't think they believe that he's willing to take military action. And so I think he needs to reset their expectations in Beijing on this trip that, yes, he really is willing to take out a North Korean missile, and he's willing to stop to take out a North Korean nuclear test site, and it'll be limited to that. Only because if the North Koreans don't retaliate, just like the Syrians didn't retaliate, then that'll be it.
Well, this is a president who
prides
prides himself on
expectations.
On his ability to negotiate. Yeah. And the conversation that he's about to have in about 2 hours from now with this president is, as you say, just hugely consequential and fascinating. We'd like to be a fly on the wall. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good to see you both.
All right. Thanks, Martha.
Thanks.
Coming up next.
It was a cult. I felt like it was a cult. You could not penetrate them.
Wow. Donna Brazile, not done hurling attacks at Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign. She kept going today in a very big way. Law professor Jonathan Turley's here. Plus, why he says Clinton is getting a free pass in the scandal department. Also, the final amendments on the GOP revised tax reform are still being worked on at this hour on Capitol Hill. So what is in it? And what does it really mean for you? We are going to ask House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy some tough questions about the tax bill coming up. So 1 year ago tonight, about an hour from now, it started to sink in at the Clinton campaign that they were going to lose. And it was shocking. And while Hillary has had many folks that she placed blame on, Donna Brazile, who was the head of the DNC and a close friend and advisor to the Clintons for many, many years, has ideas of her own on this now. Watch.
It should have never been a close race. So bottom line it for us.
I agree with you on that, Joe.
Bottom line it for us. Why did they lose? Was it at the end of the day arrogance?
Yes, Joe. It was a cult. I felt like it was a cult. You could not penetrate them.
Fascinating, right? Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with what else we're learning from Donna Brazile tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. Along with calling the Clinton campaign a cult, Donna Brazile says the campaign was incompetent and had taken on the odor of failure. She says when she offered advice or more support, the campaign brushed her off. Even last week, Brazile says when she warned former Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook that her book was, quote, dripping with a little hot sauce, meaning controversial, Brazile claims she was again dismissed. But now it appears Brazile herself is watering down the hot sauce, saying she never claimed the Democratic primary was rigged in Hillary's favor. But here's what she wrote, quoting, I had promised Bernie Sanders when I took the position of interim chair of the DNC that I would get to the bottom of whether or not Hillary's team had rigged the party process in her favor so that only she could win the nomination. Brazile goes on to write, quote, by September 7, the day I was making this call to Bernie, I had found my proof, and what I had found broke my heart. And today she was pressed on MSNBC. Watch.
I did not say the process was rigged. I said I went to find out.
But then
if
you
it
said you
was
came back,
rigged.
but you said proof of it being rigged in the piece. No?
I said no. Willie, I got to show you. You know, I got a little St. Anthony here, honey. And I said I would get to the bottom of whether or not Hillary's team had rigged the party process in her favor.
St. Anthony, the saint of honesty, apparently. Brazil also says she felt betrayed by CNN anchor Jake Tapper in the wake of her decision last year to share Democratic debate questions with Hillary Clinton prior to a CNN debate broadcast. She says Tapper took a swing at her, calling her unethical and journalistically horrifying, even though she didn't work as a journalist, but rather a CNN commentator. And speaking of journalistically horrifying, the opinion page of our corporate cousin, the New York Post, is now asking how it's possible that campaign reporters failed to uncover Donna Brazil's claim that because of concerns about Hillary Clinton's health, Brazil tried to replace Clinton with Joe Biden. The Post thinks it wasn't reported because the media was too focused on defeating Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Martha.
That's a great piece today by Michael Goodwin. Trace, thank you very much. So my next guest wants to know why the Clinton campaign and the DNC are being given somewhat of a pass for their scandals, but they continue to pile on President Trump. Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law attorney and a George Washington law professor. Professor Turley, always good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Your piece is fascinating. It says the laws all being flat, which is taken from Thomas More. Clinton supporters search for legal shelter after months of lowering the standard to target Trump. What do you mean by that?
Well, for many months, I've been objecting to what I see as a reinterpretation of criminal laws that are adopting such low and amorphous standards that you could charge anybody with most anything. And that's dangerous. But there's this cottage industry of coming up with crimes that you can charge President Trump with. And the result, I think, is that we're going into a very dangerous period where we're using criminal laws as an extension of politics. But what's curious is that now that Hillary Clinton and her campaign happen to be accused of very similar types of conduct in some respects, many of these same experts are retreating to the narrowness of the criminal code and saying, you know, you can't extend the code that far and there's really no need to investigate. I just don't think you can have it both ways. It seems to me at this point, and I supported the appointment of special counsel, I think you have to investigate all of this because the American people are divided. They have no faith at all in the political system or their leaders. The best the government can offer is really some answers. And I don't see how you can investigate one side and not the other at this point.
Yeah, and I remember Hillary Clinton being interviewed the other night, and she said, you know, well, our opposition research was just opposition research. That's what everybody does, even though it included paying essentially the Russians to do research and to come up with this dossier on Donald Trump. Now, when you flip it over to the other side, that kind of behavior, different circumstances, but similar behavior that's been accused is clearly seen as collusion.
Yeah, and what's very odd is that some of the things that Hillary Clinton is accused of do not require the same type of gymnastic linguistics that we saw on the Trump side. That doesn't mean that she's guilty of a crime. I'm skeptical that either of these politicians could be charged with a crime, either Trump or Clinton. But she's accused in the Uranium One deal of a pay-to-play scheme. Right. You know, $500,000 made it into the Clintons' personal accounts. Millions of dollars were given through the foundation. There was a link that's been suggested to a decision of the State Department. Now, does that mean that she committed that crime? Of course not. But that would be a crime. I mean, that's a cognizable crime. You don't have to stretch the code. So I don't see why or how people can maintain this position that, well, we have to keep investigating President Trump, but there's nothing there to investigate for Clinton.
Well, it'll go one of two ways. Either that's a neutralizing factor or it just fuels it all, and I have a feeling that the latter turns out to be the case. Jonathan Turley, thank you very much. Always good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Martha.
So still to come tonight, this picture is not what it seems. Why the backstory is becoming a disturbing trend when Ben Shapiro joins us coming up. But first, breaking news now on Capitol Hill tonight. GOP lawmakers leave without a final tax reform bill. So what are the sticking points, folks? House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy joins us with a brand new update tonight on that breaking news when we come back.
What is happening in these rooms, not as tax reform, not as tax cuts.
So moments ago, the House Ways and Means Committee left Capitol Hill with no final tax reform bill. Some of the most contentious issues, one of the big holdups, the state and local tax deduction. Here now, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Good to see you, sir. Welcome. Good to have you on the story tonight.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So Paul Ryan said earlier today when he was talking to Brian Kilmeade, everybody's rates will go down, everybody's exemption goes up. Is that really true? Everybody, every single American across this whole country, their tax rate's going to go down?
Yes, because this is what happens. We double the standard deduction. So if you're single, instead of the first $6,000 tax-free is now $12,000. A family, if you're a couple, the first $24,000. If you're a family, average family of 4, the first $55,000 you make is tax-free. But then we even lower small business, which creates more jobs, to the lowest rate it's been prior to World War II.
Now,
so everybody's rate is going down.
All right, so there's a bunch of issues here. First of all, you know, people in states like California, I'm sure you're hearing quite a bit from folks at home. Because if you lose your state and local tax deduction and you're in a high tax state like New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, these are the people who are coalescing around voting against this bill. And the number, according to the latest whip count, goes as high as 14. You can only lose 22. So how are you going to get them on board? And many of them say, no, my taxes will actually go up if I lose that deduction.
Well, that's just not true. And remember, I'm from California. So what we do in this bill is you lower the rate, you double the standard deduction. Fewer people will actually have to itemize. But the other thing that we do here is we eliminate the AMT. So if you take a household in California that has a high SALT, which is a state and local, what happens is that AMT is actually worth more than that, and we eliminate there. We also keep property tax. The average property tax in America,
up to $500,000, right?
No, that's a home deduction. A property tax is different.
Okay, so how much? But there's a cap on that property tax. It's up to
$10,000, but you know what the average American pays in a property tax? $2,500.
Yeah.
So when you look, if you just look at one item, then you'd sit back and say,
that's not true in most of New
up.
York, New Jersey, or California. It's a lot higher than that, but go ahead.
But if you look at the overall tax bill, if you eliminate the AMT, you lower the rates, you move up the standard deduction, what happens is you will pay less tax when you do your entire tax reform. And so that's what happens. I have taken all the IRS data for every congressional district. I have walked members through it so they can see where it is. And that is the uniqueness of what we have. And from day one, what's going to happen the start of the new year, people are going to see more than their paycheck. They're actually going to take more home.
All right. Well, I think everybody hopes that that's absolutely true. And there's, you know, accountants scrambling across the country and people getting out the back of the napkin trying to make sure that what you say is true. And if it isn't true, I'm sure they're going to hold you guys, your feet to the fire on it.
They should hold our feet to the fire. But remember this, the Washington Post, because the Democrats came out, Nancy Pelosi, and said that the middle class is going to pay more. They didn't get one Pinocchio, two Pinocchio, or three Pinocchios. The Democrats over in the Senate got 4 Pinocchios, the most you can.
All right, I got to squeeze in another. I hear you.
Okay.
You know, is the tax cut going to be retroactive for all of 2016?
No, it's not going to be retroactive for 2016. This is going to be going forward. But there is one element that will be retroactive to September 27th, and that's 100% expensing for business. So business can make that expensing now, buying that new manufacturing.
Right, so they'll do it at the higher rate, and the argument is that that's going to be better for them. One more question. Corporate tax rates going to 20%. Is that going to be stretched out over the next couple of years, or is that going to be effective as of this 2017 tax year?
We currently have in our rate right now that it goes into effect. And the one thing people have to think about this corporate rate, they had a study come out. That means $4,000 more into household income.
But you just said we have it in right now. So I'm thinking that means that when the Senate has it, there's some wiggle room there. Am I right?
I think the Senate may have a different version. They're going to come out tomorrow. We're going to move this bill out of Ways and Means tomorrow. We'll have this on the floor next week. The Senate will then pass theirs and we'll go to conference. But the one thing you have to remember, they're all tax cuts.
All right. Did you feel like there was a message sent last night in that election to all of you?
Well, I think that was a very good message to everybody. We need to get this done, and I think it's going to help get tax reform passed.
All right. Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming on tonight. So when tragedy strikes, we often hear messages like this from our leaders.
I also want to take a moment to continue sending our thoughts, prayers, and deepest condolences to the victims of the horrific assault on a church.
But in today's politically charged environment, even statements like that have become controversial. Ben Shapiro weighs in on that next.